Welcome to New York's #2 sports show. The Yankees win the series against the Seattle Mariners, taking 2 of 3 in Seattle, finishing up the season opening road trip, going 5-1. Of course, they swept San Francisco, and then they take 2 of 3 from Seattle, and the pitching continues to be excellent. Yet again, it is Max Fried and Cam Schlittler putting up scoreless outings, looking good doing so. Fried, 7 innings of scoreless ball in game 2. Cam Schlittler, 6 in the third. Only 2 hits, no walks, 7 strikeouts, just pure brilliance for them. Now, neither of them, and we'll discuss it very shortly, but just like last week in terms of me, as far as the player of the series, I ended up deciding to be neither of them. And, last week I gave it to Schlittler over Fried and Stanton. Well, there's another hitter that kind of makes his way into this that, again, totally up for debate. Schlittler and Fried were both fantastic, but I actually ended up giving it to someone else. Um, but, you know, if not for a little bit of a dicey ending to game 3, like this was a chance for 3 runs allowed through 6 games. Still, it's unbelievable. It's 6 runs allowed in the first 6 games of the season, which is absolutely insane. As I kind of predicted last episode, this was going to be more of the low-scoring variety of a series in Seattle. But again, like for the Yankees to only allow 6 runs through 6 games, I mean, the closest team when I look at it would be the Atlanta Braves, who've allowed, which is still impressive. Although, look, Atlanta was home against, and their record has been a little bit on the easier side. They're coming off of a series home against the Athletics, and before that, they were home against the Royals. So, unbelievable work. With the bullpen, I do have some concerns from an overall depth perspective, and we'll discuss that. But, the starting pitching is really solid, and you still don't even have anything, from Cole, Rodon, Schmidt. Rodon may have had a little bit of a setback hamstring wise, so we'll see. It doesn't sound like it's anything major, but he was supposed to come back, I think, in late April. Could that be pushed back slightly? Maybe. And like another guy who hasn't even factored in yet is Luis Heel. And let's not totally forget about him, right? I feel like his stock has dropped slightly, but this is still someone that, as a number 5 starter, thereabouts in this rotation, I mean, that's not bad either. So that is going to be the strength of this team, and it's playing out so far. But to be fair, once things go back to Yankee Stadium, expect things to be a little bit different, where the home runs will start to kind of pop up a little bit more for the offense, and the pitching won't be quite as elite as it's been, right? You can't forget about that, right? At San Francisco, at Seattle, those are going to be matchups that the pitching is going to do fairly well in. But just the way it's been, to the extreme that it's been, is just really, really impressive. So, and as far as, again, speaking, going into the series, it didn't literally happen this way, but game 1 was kind of that one I was talking about, where they lost, where it didn't go to extra innings, but it was a walk-off 2-1 win by Seattle, where there was just nothing going on. We've seen that game a lot. It's interesting. The Yankees seem to win these series pretty regularly in Seattle and just in general, but the games that they end up losing in a lot of cases end up being exactly as we saw in game 1. It happens again, which in some ways is even more impressive. Like when the Yankees do lose, the few games they lose to Seattle, it ain't by much. They've had their number, and look, the Yankees deserved their fate last year. They were terrible against the Blue Jays in the regular season and the postseason, but it's one of those things where if they did land with the Mariners, there's a decent chance the Yankees would have won that based on everything we've seen. Whether it be last year, prior to that, the Yankees have just done very well against the Mariners, even what I believe is to be a pretty good Mariner team here, although their lineup is really, really ice cold to start the season. Their best players have not given them a whole lot. Really, some of the bottom of the order guys, like a Cole Young, was really more productive. So let's get into it as far as best player and worst player of the series. Like I said, Schlittler and Fried, yet again, you could have went with either of them. And I almost feel bad with Fried, like the fact that he didn't get it from me for either one. And look, you know, There's honorable mention. I mean, you could even go with co-awards, but for this one, I'm giving it to Ben Rice. He, the San Francisco series, he started 2 of the 3 games. He wasn't bad. Like, he was fine. He went 2 for 8 in that series. He had a double. He had a couple of RBIs. Like, he really had, better than most in that series, right? I mean, you look at some of these, through 6 games, these, stat lines, some of these Yankees, it's pretty ugly. Ben Rice has emerged. Obviously, Giancarlo Stanton, who had yet again, his multi-hit streak is alive at 5. He didn't start the 3rd game, so a little bit of a double off day situation for Stanton. So that kind of took him out of the real running for the best player of the series. But Ben Rice ends up going in this series 5 for 9 with, um, 5 runs, 2 doubles, a homer, 3 RBIs, 3 walks, and no strikeouts. I mean, that's just ridiculous. And it's really good pitching for the most part, right? Seattle's got a very quality staff. Um, and so Ben Rice now sits at again, it's early, but a 412 batting average, a 524 OPS, and a 1289 OPS. And what I love more than anything is the walk to strikeout ratio on the season, 4 walks to 3 strikeouts. So he has put together quality at bats. He's looked pretty darn good at first base. Not really many mistakes, but I just think that Rice, he's something to be really, really, proud about. Kind of like, it's different, but like you can tell Cam Schlittler, there's something really special going on with him. Ben Rice, maybe it's not to that degree, but this is like you can tell that this is going to be a very, very good major league hitter. He just is. He has a good idea of the zone. He hits the ball so hard. It's just nice to be getting these players from the system. Um, the Yankees have had trouble with that, right? I mean, we don't have to go through it, but it is a thing. I mean, obviously, Aaron Judge, that speaks for itself. But beyond that, not a whole lot, right? I think a lot of the top Yankee players in recent years have been, via trade or free agency. So just to name a few there, that's really how you build a winner in a real way. And so how could you not, for the homegrown, it's going to feel a little bit more satisfying than it would be for someone that you pull from outside the organization. To be able to have that player grow and build and now be on the major league club and succeed is just great. Now let's go to the worst player of the series. And kind of went a little bit back and forth on this. I'll say that it's not Aaron Judge, but it could have been. It could have been. He's 1 for 11 in this series with, I believe, 3 or 4 strikeouts. I want to say it might have been 4 for Judge. Let me just get that right. 1 for 11 with 4 strikeouts and a walk. Not good. And really, after last series, now he had the 2 homers, and they were pretty big, but he wasn't that great last series either. This is going to Ryan McMahon. And you know what? It's a little bit hypocritical of me because I kind of took Stanton out of the running. Not that he was deserving of the award, but because of the fact that he only played 2 of the 3 games. McMahon only started 2 of the 3 games. However, he did appear in all 3. And so he ends up in this series. The sample size is fairly low, but he went 0 for 7 with 4 strikeouts. And as well, he did have an error in game 1 that, look, could Ben Rice have scooped it? For sure. But some of McMahon's throws have been bounced in the early going. Some have been what you expect where McMahon has that strong arm, but some have not been great. But then even in the last game, it goes down as a double in the 9th inning, but that's one that McMahon should have caught. I'm sorry. Like he kind of overjumped it. And so for McMahon, there's concern for me. It's not surprising and it's early. And I love what he brings defensively. And I also understand that he's not a full-time guy on this team. I mean, hell, he didn't even start in game 3 against a righty, Rosario. So he's someone that is not guaranteed really anything as far as playing time goes. But I don't really know if those stance changes are going to make a difference. Like Ryan McMahon, he strikes out a lot. as a Yankee, he hasn't hit that many home runs. Um, he is someone that could be an issue among others. But Ryan McMahon, and maybe part of me choosing him, and I know Judge wasn't good in the first series either, but Ryan McMahon didn't do a whole lot. He had a pretty lucky kind of seeing eye 2-run single, which he was in the running as well for that. I ended up going with Chisholm, which I know is a little bit ridiculous for me to do that in a series where the Yankees swept, but I want to try to keep some consistency, but I can acknowledge that. But McMahon didn't have a great series against San Francisco. So there you go there. Ben Rice is my best player of the series. Ron McMahon is my worst. Um, let's go into the first game. And still with the Yankees, no transactions changes through the first 6 games of the season. Um, Ryan Weathers makes his Yankee debut, and he was okay. I didn't expect greatness from him, but he kept him in it, didn't go too deep into the game. 4 1/3 innings, 4 hits, 1 run, 2 walks, 7 strikeouts. So that's good. That's impressive. 7 Ks in 4+ innings. Um, not horrible. Like, I don't know where it ends up with him. His next outing will actually be against his former team, the Marlins, so that'll be interesting. But it could have. It started out potentially bad, where he walked the leadoff guy. Like it could have blown up on him, and it didn't. So that was good for the Mariners. The Yankees have had a lot of trouble with Luis Castillo. Luis Castillo, but it's interesting though. Logan Gilbert on the other end of it, Yankees did well against Logan Gilbert, and really, Logan Gilbert was the Mariners' opening day starter, where Luis Castillo, for what it's worth, and I don't know if there was something that I'm not aware of, right? Where maybe he was behind schedule. I don't think that was the case. Like, he was technically the number 5 starter, which speaks to what they have. Like Brian Wu, he's not even. I believe he must be on the IL. And apologies for not being more clued in on that, but um, whatever it is, Castillo versus the Yankees, he does well. 6 innings, 2 hits, no runs, 2 walks, 7 strikeouts. They really couldn't do much of anything against him. The Yankees in this game only had one extra base hit. It was of course, it was Giancarlo Stanton late in the game. But this was one of those games that feels so familiar between the Yankees and the Mariners in Seattle. Um, and in this one, you know, the Mariners do score in the second inning. Weathers gets into some trouble at the start. A Rosarena single, Garver walk. Um, and then with 2 out, Cole Young. It wasn't pretty. It was a broken bat RBI single to right, but Weathers was not able to get out of that initial sort of jam. He was able to escape, a leadoff walk in the first inning, wasn't as lucky in the second, and the Mariners get that important run in a game where runs were at a premium. The Mariners take a 1-0 lead. As far as ABS, because I do want to try to cover ABS as much as I can within a game, but I almost want to do it in a way where, it's more just an overall look at things. And um, in this game, it was very frustrating for the Yankees, where Mike Estabrook was calling all of these low pitches in pretty short order. And this all happened within the first few innings. Um, I think with Caballero, it was twice in the same at bat, and Boone was upset, and I don't blame him. So 5 successful challenges by the Yankees, and apologies if this is not exactly in order, but Caballero with 2, Rice with 1, Stan with 1, and Chisholm Jr. with 1. So this was a game where I had no complaints with the Yankees in terms of their challenges and decision making. They did a nice job, and that was it. 5 successful Yankee challenges. And they were all pretty much very similar from Estabrook. All low pitches called a strike that should not have been. So that kind of covers that up right there. And then moving along, Giancarlo Stanton ends up with a single that just wasn't really identified by the Mariners fielders. Kind of miscommunication, kind of lost it maybe, and Stanton unfortunately ends up trying to go to second and is thrown out. So he probably should have stayed back at first. Anyone else would have gotten a second, but we know Stan, doesn't have a whole lot of giddy up, and, doesn't really run with much speed or authority. So it's not as if Stanton was necessarily dogging it out of the box. He was going at the same pace, but just with the way he is, um, you know, ends up being thrown out at second there. A frustration as far as Caballero is concerned. Caballero was picked. He gets a single. Caballero has slowed down a little bit. Not that he got off to a red hot start, but Unfortunately, I think there's a good chance that Volpe will get his shortstop job back. I'm not confident that Volpe will do the job. I'd love to see Caballero take it away, but Caballero, forgetting about Volpe, Caballero's skill set is probably best as a pinch runner, a guy that you can spot in, who has a ton of versatility. Like him as your everyday starting shortstop isn't really going to be too successful. That kind of aside, what's tough with Caballero, and we'll talk about with Chisholm later in the series, is just a situation where Caballero gets picked off first. Like too many times where he gets out on the bases that are just really even aren't necessary. Like I understand you can get caught stealing at times. Hey, that comes with it, with the way that he is. But the pickoffs, that's a little frustrating. And so that ends the inning in the fifth. Weathers gets in a little trouble in the bottom of the fifth, ends up second and third, one out. And Fernando Cruz, who did a nice job this series, Fernando Cruz strikes out Canzone as a pinch hitter, and then Julio Rodriguez. So that was a nice job by Fernando Cruz. Bullpen did a pretty good job in this one. Jake Bird. Now there was that McMahon throwing error, but surrounding that, Bird with a scoreless sixth. He has been also effective, and he's going to be important, I think. I don't love the overall look and depth of this bullpen. It's not horrible, but I don't feel great about some of the lesser parts. And just, I think there's a lack of trust in a lot of them, and it just makes it tough for some of the upper echelon guys. Boone makes a lot of good decisions in the top of the seventh in game one. They bring on the lefty Jose A. Ferrer for Castillo, and Ben Rice is kept in. He could have went to Goldschmidt, and we'll talk about Goldschmidt. Goldschmidt had a pretty big moment in game three, but Ben Rice singles off the lefty, and again, that kind of, again, I don't even think I mentioned that as far as his best player of the series. Like, that's a big lefty-lefty hit where there was trust in him, and he got it done. He goes to second on a wild pitch. Giancarlo Stanton reaches on an error by Brendan Donovan. Jazz Chisholm Jr., who, look, I don't love his beginning at all. Only 2 series, but he has not been very good. You know, did have he had an RBI hit in game 2. Wasn't all bad, but Jazz does ground out. Luckily, he hit it softly to the point where he was able to beat it out. They get the force out at second, and then Rosario pinch hits for McMahon, because you don't want to have the lefty-lefty McMahon versus Ferrer. The Mariners go to a righty in Bizzardo, so it's righty-righty. It's not ideal because Rosario is not as good versus righties, but Rosario is a contact guy and gets a sac fly. So I like how Boone handled the inning. He kept Bryce in and didn't go to Goldschmidt, which worked out, and then he ends up making the Rosario for McMahon switch, which leads to the sac fly. So that was nice. Ties it up at 1. Then the bottom of the 7th, it is a Brent Hedrick, Camilo Doval combination where Hedrick, again, it's been a little bit of a mixed bag for him, where he struggled against the lefties and gotten righties out. He is not the Tim Hill lefty type. He ends up getting into some trouble, but strikes Cal Raleigh out with second and third, one out. Cal Raleigh was a pinch hitter, by the way. Cal Raleigh did not start this game. He has struggled. He ends up getting with a couple of big hits that we'll talk about in the series, but Raleigh strikes out, and then Camilo Doval comes on, and he is able to get out of it, getting Julio Rodriguez to ground out. Then Paul Blackburn comes in the 8th. This is what I'm talking about, where it's just not totally ideal, where you have Yarborough and Blackburn are guys that are they're really starters, multi-inning guys that really should be in the middle of the game, where maybe a starter didn't go deep. I'm not even really blaming Boone necessarily, honestly, because you didn't really have a whole lot at your disposal, quite frankly. I mean, Cade Winquist, they don't even trust him, and I don't blame them for not trusting him. Blackburn, there was a 2-out walk to Garver. Other than that, solid inning from Paul Blackburn. Here was the chance in the 9th inning, and there weren't many for the Yankees. The one real chance they had was Matt Brash on in the 9th, 1-out double Stanton, and Randall Grichuk pinch runs. That was the only time we saw Randall Grichuk this series, I might add. He did not get any action in the series, and look, I think for him, playing time will be a bit sporadic. He'll get the starts versus lefties for the most part, but against righties, you're not going to see him a whole lot. He did pinch run for Stanton, and Jazz Chisholm Jr. grounds out in a really big opportunity, and what was a 3-1 count. Good leverage situation for him, doesn't get it done. And then Ahmed Rosario, in an unideal matchup against a righty, didn't look very good and struck out versus Matt Brash. To me, that was your real opportunity. because then even if you got to extra innings, not to say that the Yankees couldn't have won, but we've seen the Yankees just in general. It is tough on the road in extra innings. There is a disadvantage to that. And I feel like the Mariners bullpen was a little more equipped anyway. The Yankee bullpen was pretty used at that point. So by the ninth, Paul Blackburn's still in there, and I don't even disagree with it. I'll tell you one thing that I may have disagreed with. Not even may, I did. So leadoff single Leo Rivas, excuse me. Cole Young flies out, and then Brendan Donovan single first and third, one out. And now Kyle Raleigh comes up. For me, I would have pitched very carefully to Kyle Raleigh. And originally, and Matt Blake comes out there. Originally, they did kind of do that. And it was a 2-1 count. All the pitches were out of the zone. And, Boone, after the game, they asked him, and he really had no desire at all to walk Kyle Raleigh. So that, again, I disagree with the Yankees, where I'm not even saying you don't have to intentionally walk him, because I don't love the bases loaded walk possibility. I don't. I'm not saying it's a no-brainer, but I don't like how basically the 2-1 was grooved over the middle, got way too much plate on a cutter, and Kyle Raleigh gets a walk-off RBI single for the Mariners. And I would have maybe tried to pitch around him. I know Blackburn is maybe a neutral splits, maybe reverse splits guy, so him versus Julio Rodriguez may not have worked out, but Rodriguez as well has been struggling. I wouldn't have hated for Blackburn to go after Rodriguez, and then Tim Hill, who I believe was warming up, for him to go after Naylor in a base loaded situation. Now, the only downside with that is that it takes Blackburn out of the game in a potential bottom of the 10th situation, but you still did have Yarborough was still at your of course, there's Bednar, who you would likely want to save if you had a lead. You probably had enough there to make it work. And so, look, it was a bit of, to me, the Yankees were in trouble anyway, and even my scenario probably would not have gotten them out of it. But in the moment, I'm thinking I don't love, if I'm Blackburn, I'm trying to have Raleigh chase. And that's kind of what, again, he did kind of foul off that second pitch that was out of the zone. Anyway, not going to make a big deal about it, but didn't love that decision. And so Kyle Raleigh gets that walk-off hit. So the Yankees get their first loss of the season by pretty slim margins, but the Yankees no longer undefeated there. Game two, it's pretty awesome. The Yankees just, Fried and Schlittler, they get it done. Game two, less of a sweat job than game three. Game two, you kind of go back to your regular lineup, sans Austin Wells. JC Escar gets his first start. Didn't really do a whole lot, to be honest, but did a nice job catching Max Fried. And so, Fried goes 7 innings, 3 hits, no runs, 1 walk, 6 strikeouts. So ERA still sits at 0. He's 2-0. Fantastic. And for the Mariners, Logan Gilbert, with the loss drops him to 0-1, 5 1/3 innings, 7 hits, 5 runs, 3 walks, and 6 strikeouts. Yankees have done well against him. And whether the stats back that up or not, I look at Logan Gilbert and just from a Yankee fan's vantage point, and I'm sure there's been times, and I can even remember that I think there were times where he has done very well against them, but by and large, for someone like him, who again was the opening day starter for Seattle, they've done well against him. So, and by the way, key moment of the last game, it was an obvious one, but the key moment was that one I was talking about. It was the Kyle Raleigh at bat against Paul Blackburn. That was your key moment from game one. For game two, it happens very quickly. My key moment comes in the first inning. And with 2 out, single for Cody Bellinger. And Cody Bellinger's had a nice, he hasn't really popped off yet, but Bellinger has had a very nice beginning of the season, right? Just steady at this point. Cody Bellinger is 286, 781 OPS. It's not going to jump out at you, but he's done a decent job, right? No homers, no RBIs. But if you remember last year, he started off pretty terribly. Not to say that couldn't happen if we fast forward a week or two from now, but so far, one of the more consistent starts for the Yanks. So with 1 out, Ben Rice, RBI double, down the line, scores Cody Bellinger. And that ends up being my moment of the game. Now, you can kind of combine it with Giancarlo Stanton dunking an RBI steal to knocking Ben Rice, right? So it's kind of that combined, but if I had to give one, I'd give it the first one, the Ben Rice double. And that was a pretty close play at the plate potentially, but not the best throw from Seattle. So Cody Bellinger scored. And then again, Ben Rice scores on the Stanton hit, 2-0. And then Fried is just in cruise control. From an ABS standpoint in this game, the only one that I had a problem with was, in case I miss it later, was Jazz Chisholm, in a situation where the Yankees were winning. It was, maybe I'll get there. They were either up 2-0 or 5-0. And Chisholm, it was clearly a strike. I worry about that with Jazz a little bit, where he may be a little bit over aggressive. I hope he is a little more selective and thinks a little bit more, because that just was not a good challenge. Other than that, though, Grisham had one overturned correctly, Max Fried as well. So, that was nice, but yeah, nothing overly significant um, on the ABS front in this game. Let's see here. It was Chisholm in the fourth. It was the fourth inning, Yankees up 2-0, and it was a 1-2 pitch. Just not the right time to do it. Just not the right time to do it. And it was clearly a strike. So, let's see here. I wish I could say more on Fried. He was a lot better in this one than San Francisco. San Francisco, he didn't quite have it, but just was able to kind of navigate through. I thought he was in great command. And again, the 1 walk and 6 strikeouts kind of speak to that. There was a hit by pitch as well thrown in there, but Fried really did a very nice job navigating through the Seattle lineup. And then where the Yankees are able to break it back open is the 6th. Trent Grisham with a grand rule double to start it out. Judge does strike out, unfortunately, but Cody Bellinger singles to move Grisham over to third. And with Ben Rice up, Cody Bellinger still second, but the Cal Raleigh throw goes into the outfield, and Trent Grisham scores. So that's good as well. Showing some aggressiveness on the base paths. Bellinger smartly goes to second on the with the steal, and Cal Raleigh, he could have ate it, knowing that a throw to the outfield scores a run. That's exactly what does happen. So it makes it 3-0. Ben Rice walks. Giancarlo Stanton, RBI double. We get 5 straight games to start the season with multi-hits. 4th player in Yankee franchise history to do that. We'll see if on the home opener, if he can extend that to 6. But love what I'm seeing from Stan. If he can stay healthy, it's going to be big for the Yanks. So that makes it 4-0. Logan Gilbert is out at that point. And then Jazz Chisholm Jr. With the infield in, he smashes an RBI single to make it 5-0. So that was good to see. Unfortunately, Escar and Caballero don't add on to it, but Yankees were in good control here, up 5-0. Fried, like I said, goes 7. Got in a little bit of trouble in the 7th inning, but he was good. Gets out of there. Brett Hedrick pitches a scoreless bottom of the 8th, and then Tim Hill with a 1-2 3/9. So a pretty stress-free Yankee win there. So now we go to game 3, and everyone's kind of excited for Cam Schlittler to do what he does, and he didn't disappoint. He ends up finishing the game, retiring 15 straight Mariners. He wins to go to 2-0, 6 1/3 innings, 2 hits, no walks, 7 strikeouts. Again, has not allowed a run yet this season. For the Mariners, it's George Kirby. And George Kirby, 1-1 now with the loss, 6 innings, 5 hits, 4 runs, 3 walks, 6 strikeouts. He was doing a good job of kind of matching Schlittler as best he could, but then we'll talk about a situation where it kind of falls apart a bit for him in the 6th inning. So in this game, Stanton takes a seat. Rice moves to DH. Goldschmidt goes to first. And Rosario, against the righty, did start over Ryan McMahon, which was interesting. And Austin Wells comes back into the lineup day game after night game after Escara had started the night before. And in the first inning, similar to the second game, Bellinger reaches with 2 outs, a walk. He's still second. And yet again, it's a Ben Rice down the right field line RBI double to make it 1-0. Ben Rice, is able to, right away get it going, right? Despite Samara and Judge struggling, which is there. It's nice to have that combination where 3, 4, 5, Bellinger, Rice, Stanton has really been where a lot of the action has come for the Yankees so far. Leadoff double by Brendan Donovan against Cam Schlittler, but then he's able to, go 1, 2, 3 the rest of the inning. And just, I don't know, he wasn't necessarily overpowering Seattle, I wouldn't say. It wasn't like that, but he just was pounding the strike zone and was ahead of and was so pitch efficient and economical, because he is still in a pitch count. Otherwise, he would have went deeper. Cam Schlittler threw 7, was it 80? Did he reach 80? 79, right? Like, normally he could have easily went at least 7 innings. He could have pitched in the 8th inning without much of a problem. And that it just makes it even more impressive that knowing that he was, look, he could have pitched well and only went 5, but yet back-to-back games, he went into the 7th inning. So, let's jump to the 5th. Jazz Chisholm Jr. leadoff single, and then he gets picked off. Yeah, he was kind of adjusting his, like, I don't know, I don't even know what he was kind of doing there. He wasn't, like, quite locked in, and he gets picked off. That shit can't happen. It really can't. Um, Seattle was in a bit of a tough time ABS wise. Seattle was in a little bit of a tough time as far as Raleigh loses a challenge as a catcher in the first inning, and they had it for a while, but eventually by the end of the game, they lost both of their challenges. For the Yankees, mostly all right, but Austin Wells, we'll get there. Austin Wells was not a great challenge, but let's go to the 6th inning. Trent Grisham leadoff walk, and then with 2 out, Ben Rice walk. So it leads to first and second 2 out for Paul Goldschmidt, who really struggled against righties last year in a pretty major way. Like he had like a low 600 OPS versus righties. Paul Goldschmidt in what is my moment of the game. And he had a big home run last year against the Mariners as a pinch hitter, I remember. In similar situation. That I believe either tied the game or gave the Yankees the lead in that one. Here, this was a big extender. To go from 1-0 to 4-0, he smashes a 3-run homer off of George Kirby. I mean, Paul Goldschmidt, again, if you utilize that Rice Goldschmidt combo could really be a major, major strength for the Yankees, potentially. It showed itself so far. I really think it could continue. Where Paul Goldschmidt is not run down by the end of the season, and he is, basically a guy that plays here and there, pinch hits sometimes, and he still has it. Like he is not completely cooked. I don't think Paul Goldschmidt has a whole lot left in the tank, but this is someone that can still do some damage. And the Yankees take a 4-0 lead. That was that gave them a lot of breathing room. Now it got interesting at the end, though. It did. It's in the 7th where Austin Wells, up 4-0 again. It kind of reminded me of Caballero in the first game of the season. And Wells, he's done a great job behind the plate. I just did not love him in this situation doing that. Again, I can accept it if the situation presented itself. Look, I'm never going to love it. When you get it wrong, it's always going to be frustrating. I'll admit that. But I mean, like, if you're losing, okay, fine. I can maybe understand it, but like be a little bit smart. So, they lose that challenge there. Ryan McMahon comes in for defense, by the way, in the 7th. Schlittler gets the first out of the 7th. So again, he retired 15 straight to end his outing. And he's only led 3 base runners in his 2 starts, 3 hits, no walks, like 15 strikeouts. Just insane. Fernando Cruz finishes out the 7th inning with a couple of outs. So again, he did a nice job in games 1 and 3. Let's go to the bottom of the 8th. Camilo Doval doesn't exactly do the job. He ends up giving up a 1-out single to Canzone. Then he allows a single to Cole Young, and then with 2 outs, he walks Brendan Donovan. So it's bases loaded 2 out, and they bring in Bednar. It's one of 3 things you could have theoretically done. You could have left Doval in, you could have brought Bednar in, or the other option to me, you could have gone Tim Hill at the point of Brendan Donovan. At that point, right, when it was 2 on, 2 out. But I understand the risk. If Tim Hill didn't get Donovan out, you do worry about a potential grand slam for Cal Raleigh off of Tim Hill. That does exist in a major way. It does. You don't really want Tim, even though Cal Raleigh might be more of a threat from the left side, you still don't want Tim Hill against Cal Raleigh. So I'm not saying I'd even disagree with it. It speaks to me more to just an unfortunate situation where, look, Cam Schlittler, if he didn't have the pitch count problem and goes deeper into the game, this could have but maybe not. Like if Schlittler goes 7, Doval probably comes in the 8th regardless. But I don't know. I don't love the feeling of the pen. Like I do like certain members. Hell, I like Bednar. I do like Doval's potential and Cruz as well. But I don't know. For me, I don't know that this holds up. Anyway, David Bednar comes in, and Bednar, look, it's been a little, even though the results have been mostly pretty good, there's been some scares. And whether you want to talk about the World Baseball Classic or not, it hasn't been quite seamless for Bednar. And Cal Raleigh, Luckily, he doesn't get a grand slam, but Cal Raleigh does get a 2-run single off of Bednar. He then does, though, strike out Julio Rodriguez. So crisis somewhat averted. I mean, it was pretty cool. It would have been cool if the Yankees could have got another game of a shutout, but, again, that's just getting greedy. But again, it's a combination of mostly Doval, but Bednar as well, having some struggles in the 8th inning. But in the 9th inning, a big insurance run. Ben Rice hits his first home run of the season. That was big. To give a little bit of more breathing room for Bednar, makes it 5-2. Then with 1 out in the 9th, and the pitch count keeps on rising and rising and rising for Bednar, he ended up throwing 40 pitches, which probably puts his availability for the home opener a little bit in jeopardy, which is unfortunate. They have a day off. There's a decent chance that he may not be able to go. It's a 1-out double by Rosarena, but again, that's a play that McMahon could have easily made. Then they get a ground out, and Dominic Canzone extends the game with an RBI single. And then he moves to second on defensive indifference, but Cole Young gives a little bit of a ride to right, but Aaron Judge makes the play, and David Bednar picks up his 3rd save of the season. So again, that is, for me, leaving the series. There's still a lot of offensive issues for sure, but the bullpen, it's been mostly good, but I see cracks for sure. By far, and there's a way to go, but that rotation is where this team can stand out above the rest. If they're healthy, the depth is pretty insane. So Yankees take 2 of 3, and now they head home, and that's going to be exciting. And to a Yankee Stadium crowd, that's going to be excited, right? Like, it's nice. You start out 5-1, and now, you go 1-5. Like, I don't know, the juice just to me isn't quite there. It's there a little bit. It's home opener. That's always going to be exciting. But even more so, they are going to get a nice welcome back home. And it's going to be a matchup between Yuri Perez and Will Warren. So that's a pretty big one for Will Warren to get the opening day start. That's a pretty, for someone who, was in some big games last year. But look, he didn't start any playoff games. This is probably one of his bigger starts in a way in terms of his, adrenaline and kind of being amped up. Let's see what he can do. Will Warren, who didn't go deep in San Francisco, but there's still a lot of high hope for him as someone that's going to be right in the middle of that rotation, even when guys come back. So that's the opening day start, Friday afternoon. A rare Saturday night home game at Yankee Stadium. I think in part the reason why that was done is in case there's a rain out Friday, you want to kind of give that Saturday afternoon an opening. I think that's the reason why. Most times you have a day off after that, but I think just with the second weekend of the season and with the Yankees having traveled and whatnot, they weren't able to put an off day after. So that's kind of the way they can minimize it. So like I said before, Ryan Weathers, and I'm interested in this as well. I mean, he was traded from the Marlins to the Yankees. He gets the start against Max Meyer. So that's one that, I think the Yankees have a chance to maybe do something off of Mayer. Who knows, right? Where like Yuri Perez, I'm a little bit more concerned about. Like, I think that's a much better pitcher's. I think there's a little more of a pitcher's duel on the Friday game than the Saturday game. And then Sunday, it ends up with Max Fried against Chris Paddock. That's the matchup I like the most on paper, right? Fried obviously speaks for itself, and Chris Paddock, struggled a bit in his first outing this year with the Marlins. So I like that one a lot. And I think that the Marlins, look, they started out 5-1. So they're sort of one of the feel-good stories start the season too. I think the Marlins are a scrappy bunch. But it's a series that certainly I would be very disappointed the Yankees didn't win it, right? I'm not even looking for a sweep. Those are just never easy. I mean, I think that the Yankees are capable of sweeping. I do believe that. Like, some series I look at and I say, like, even like this one in Seattle, that was going to be a tough one to sweep. Just was. You have a chance to do it, but hey, if you go into 2-3, keep things moving, that'd be great. And I am excited for them to get back home. And then from there, they'll have 3 against the A's. So not a ridiculously tough homestand to open up. And hopefully the Yankees can kind of build on this 5-1 start. But yeah, unbelievable pitching. Fried and Schlittler do it again. Big series from Ben Rice. And, the Yankees are feeling pretty good. Is really one of the more positive and hot teams, despite the offense being cool. I'm not really concerned about it from a regular season standpoint, but pretty good stuff from the Yankees. And now they will head home for their home opener, and it starts up against the Marlins.